No.
Hoffwn gyflwyno aelodau annibynnol o'r bwrdd. I would like to introduce the independent members of the board. A'r prif weithredwr ac aelodau gweithredol ac anweithredol o'r bwrdd. And the board chief executive, executive and non-executive board members. Hoffwn gyflwyno nawr gadeirydd y bwrdd, yr athro Donna Mead OBE. I would now like to introduce the chair, Professor Donna Mead OBE.
Bore da pawb, croeso cynnes iawn I chi gyd. I just heard the translation in my ear, which startled me. Apologies for that. Croeso cynnes iawn I chi gyd I cyfarfod hwn pwysig iawn heddiw. Welcome everybody to this very important meeting of Flinders University NHS Trust board today. The meeting is being live streamed so that any member of the public or any member of staff who wishes to observe the meeting in real time is able to do so, but it is also being recorded and will be available on our website in the next day or so. It'll be there so that people can observe the meeting at their convenience. Bethan Davis is here providing simultaneous translation service, so thank you to Bethan once again for that. And as I've said, a warm welcome everybody to this meeting. We have a number of colleagues who joined us online today, and there are a number of colleagues in the room. Always a bit of a, a tricky act to make sure that we spot everybody as they wish to speak. So usual process, please, which is hands up in the room and electronic hand online, and non-board secretary and I will do our very best to ensure we call you in the order that you raise your hands. But bear with us. I mean, sometimes there's a nanosecond when you look up and there's no electronic hands up, and then you look down and one's popped up and you've missed it. So I'll do my very best. If we can then go to apologies, please. I've not been made aware of any apologies. Is that the case? Thank you very much. Oh, just Andrew Westwell will join the meeting as soon as he can due to a prior commitment, which I think is something to do with a PhD student. He did let me know. And in attendance today, we've got a number of colleagues. Stephen Cheney, whose face I saw earlier. Are you still with us, Stephen?
Yes.
I am indeed, yes.
Oh, there you are. Yeah, okay, thank you. You just sort of disappeared. So Stephen is here for Head of Internal Audit, NHS Rail Shared Services, and of course we've got a paper from Internal Audit in our pack today. Richard Harries to my left. Thank you, Richard, Director of Financial Audit, Audit Wales. To support item 5.1.0, and Tracy Hughes, I saw Tracy's face earlier, Head of Financial Operations to support items in section 2. This is a very important meeting, the main intent of which is to sign off the annual report, the accounts, the performance, etc., etc. And so before I begin the meeting proper, I want to acknowledge how much work has gone into producing all of these papers across the Trust, and to our colleagues who supported us in both Audit Wales and in Shared Services. It's been a huge amount of work, as happens every year. It has just seemed to me this year that, that there's been a lot of work to get all our papers ready, and I would like that, and my thanks minuted, please. So the next item on the agenda is 1.3.0, declarations of interest. Are there any matters, you know, that need to be declared that haven't previously been declared, colleagues, which are pertinent to the items on the agenda today. Thank you. The first item on the agenda is the cover paper for the annual report and accounts. And in a moment, I'm going to invite Lauren Fee and Matthew Bunce and Non Gwilym to present this item. But again, I want to say, I think it was an excellent cover paper, which gives you a route map through all the papers that we're about to address. And it was very helpful to me as I was working my way through the papers. So, shall I hand over to Lauren first, or you first, not?
Yeah,
okay,
I'll
thank you.
cover paper. Diolch, Cadeirydd. Hoffwn gyflwyno heddiw I chi adroddiad blynyddol yr ymddiriedolaeth ar gyfer 2024-25. As presented in the paper, there are three main parts to our Trust's annual report: the performance report, the accountability report, including the corporate governance report, director's report and remuneration report, and finally the annual accounts. All the documents have been developed in line with the current version of the Welsh Government's Manual for Accounts. Prior to any questions you may have, any comments, and I dare say any typos that you may have spotted, I would like to thank all colleagues around the table and so many more for their support in pulling the documentation together. It has, as always, been a considerable effort, but perhaps especially so this year, given the complexity of some of the issues as identified in the report, particularly the positioning of the arrangements between the Trust and the services and programmes it hosts. I will leave it there for today. I am more than happy to take any questions you may have. Matt and Lauren, the same, I'm sure. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you, Non. So we are going to introduce the individual reports, I think. So the performance report. Is that yourself, Lauren?
Yes.
Thank you.
So the performance report covers an overview of our performance for 24 to 25, and then goes through each of our service areas with more detailed analysis in terms of the way in which we have delivered against our commitments to our patients and donors. We then talk about the well-being of our people and go on to our sustainability strategy and some detailed climate-related disclosures, which are part of the regulatory and the legislative requirements that we have for climate-related disclosures in this report. We then also include Welsh language and have a forward look to conclude. We are just conscious of the level of overlap between reports, so between Matt, Non and I, the performance section of the performance report is cross-referenced to the annual report and accounts for the in its substantive form. And thank you to Internal Audit and Audit Wales colleagues for feedback on the performance reports that we had. It was really useful, and we worked through those comments and have included that feedback in the report.
Thank you, Lauren. I'll open this item, just the performance report, please, for any queries, observations to Lauren. Sarah, please.
Just one observation in terms of the layout of the report on page 39 of 172.
Yes, put it back to the right place.
Thank you.
I can't see any other hands up.
Lindsay.
Oh, Lindsay,
Sorry,
apologies.
late hand chair, sorry. I just wanted to note, I mean, clearly the Trust Board gets to see performance on a regular basis, and I think seeing it all here in one place, looking back over the year, then again, I just wanted to reflect a little bit on what you said about the, thanks to everybody who's, dedicated in terms of all of our staff in Welsh Blood Service and in Colindra Cancer Services, who have helped us achieve all of this, and to yourselves and the team for being able to present it to us in this way. So thank you, but thanks to the wider staff as well.
Thanks, Lindsay. That's I endorse those comments. Absolutely. When you read, you've got the whole year in front of you. I do really feel it's impressive reading and demonstrates both the effort that goes into ensuring the quality of service for our patients and for our donors. I think it's a remarkable achievement. I think Gareth's hand is up. I'm reading my one little comment to the end. And then, do you want to repeat that first, Lauren, and then I'll call Gareth in?
It just prompted me to, I mean, you can obviously tell as we go through the report around the exec table how we've contributed to the individual sections, but just to respond to say, you know, it was a very much a teamwork effort between Anne and myself in taking it together. So I don't want that comment to be directed at me. It's the overview. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Gareth, please.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Roeddwn ni ddim yn siŵr pen i wneud y sylw yma ar y dechrau neu ar y diwedd, ond jyst i gadarnhau fod y Pwyllgor Archwilio wedi adolygu yr adroddiad a'r cyfrifon yn fanwl yn ei cyfarfod dydd Mawrth, ac i ategu y diolch i'r cyfarwyddwyr a'i timoedd ac i gydnabod y gwaith aruthrol sydd wedi cael ei gyflawni i gyflwyno yr adroddiad a'r cyfrifon i ni heddiw i'w cymeradwyo. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, Gareth. I didn't mention that because it's written in the cover paper that it's been to audit earlier this week, but thank you, Gareth, because we'll minute that as well. Are there any, Jazz, please?
I think just a reflection from me, I guess, from a clinical lens that, you know, I've been in post for 8 years now, and this is a really strong annual report for our performance.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel really proud about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jazz. One point I would like just to make, I'm in the chair, so I'm going to take the opportunity to make it. I'm very grateful. It's the trust for the support it's given me in developing my own Welsh language skills. I have now reached Sylfaen level 2, which is the 4th level up. There's foundation level 1, foundation level 2, Sylfaen level 1, Sylfaen level 2, and I have just completed Sylfaen level 2. Still not very confident in speaking, but I can't tell you how grateful I am to the trust for supporting me in realising my dream of becoming a Welsh speaker. Thank you. Non, I think you've introduced the accountability report in your opening remarks. So should we just go to
Absolutely, happy to take
any questions and observations? The accountability report. So mindful, colleagues, that these 3 documents are for approval, just so that we know what lens that we're looking through. And so, Matt, I'm going to hand over to you now then to chair the session on the annual accounts, and you call in your colleagues as you feel appropriate.
Yeah, obviously Gareth has pointed out that the audit committee did its due diligence on Tuesday, working through the financial statements of the accounts and asked any relevant questions. I guess I would just highlight 2 things that were identified as part of that audit committee and were then amended subsequently for the accounts that you've got in front of you, and which are picked up in Audit Wales report later on, but I will mention them. So one was in relation to a contingent liability where we've been notified of a possible claim in relation to a supplier on a procurement, so that has to be sort of included as a contingent liability. It has been since the audit committee. And another one is Audit Wales identified a classification issue in relation to Welsh pool provisions It's simply a classification error between less than 12 months and beyond 12 months. So you'll see that that is noted in their report, but not required to adjust the accounts because I'd just like to thank my team. Immense amount of work as normal. It gets more and more complicated. It feels every year with the bigger our services grow and the more complex things become, and that does translate into production of the financial statements. You may not think it does, but it does make them more complicated. Not least also, you know, the fact that we do host shared services in the Welsh Risk Pool, and that's a massive complicating factor in our accounts. People don't appreciate that. You know, that every other organisation is feeding in their audit opinion and their position into it. I'd like to thank Internal Audit for, you know, the support they provide throughout the year and all the programme of work that they do with us in terms of our financial controls and risks, and how they help us make improvements. And also Audit Wales and Richard, particularly in terms of his support this year, in terms of navigating through some tricky issues, and the team working really well with our team in getting us over the line in terms of the audit and the financial statements. I can bring Tracy in to give us a summary if the board would like of the financial statements, but of course the audit committee have been through them in depth. So I will take your advice, Chair, whether you feel that's necessary, because
well, even I can remember 48 hours ago.
Yeah.
So
questions, if there were any new questions above and beyond the audit committee questions.
So Tracy, I would like to thank Tracy also for the kind of couple of emails she sent us to lead us through the accounts in the lead up to this period, which have been very helpful, and to help the financially uninitiated to understand what's being presented to us. That's been extremely helpful this year, and I think I'm very grateful. I, for one, very grateful to Tracy for that. Lauren.
I didn't want to say something personal before the substantive session discussion had happened, but I just wanted, just from letting colleagues know a bit, because there's a note on page 159, note 8, about an overpayment of my salary. So just to let you know, it wasn't as if it's something I hadn't noticed for months. So in December, I'd gone back down to an 8D in terms of the banding, and then there was a payment made of the backdated pay, all in a lump, and then there was the agenda for changes as well. So it wasn't as if there was something I hadn't noticed. And this is this is happening right now, so I haven't yet had the mechanism from payroll to be able to pay it back. It's not as if I've been asked to repay the £4,000 3 months ago and it hasn't happened. You know, I haven't even. I want to pay it back. I just need to know, you know, how. It's not as if you can just get some code and account number and do it. So that's a live thing that I haven't even got the mechanism for yet. Just to reassure.
Do you think there's any need for us to put any note in the report, Lauren, or are you happy for it to stay as it is?
When we've gone back and forth a little bit on the wording, it is technically true. I just you know, just from a human level, I just wanted to let you know that there's a live thing.
Okay. Thank you.
Since I've got the sort code and account number, I'll transfer it back.
That's okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Lauren, for that. I'm looking to see if there are any other hands up. So what this means, colleagues, is yet another year in which this organisation has met all its statutory financial duties. That doesn't just fall on us from above. That requires tremendous amounts of our hard work across the board, you know, in terms of how we deliver our services, how we get value for money, how we look after the accounts. It's just enormous. But we have met all our statutory financial duties again this year, and I'm very pleased to note that, and thank you, Matt, to you and the entire team, but to everybody in the trust who has worked to make sure that it brings us to that position at year end, because the last 3 or 4 years is becoming ever more challenging particularly the break-even issue, has become ever more challenging, and we've achieved it. So,
yeah, I mean, the complexity of the services, the demand that's been placed on services, and yet they still manage their budgets. So, you know, and the performance, as Jazz has said.
So, so thank you. So we are asked to approve the Berindre University NHS annual report, which comprises 3 sections that we've just gone through. Are colleagues content to approve, please? There's nods all round. Nobody's hand is up. Thank you. So that's approved. Next item then, Matt, is the appendix 1 to that, which is a letter of representation. And this is covered by the recommendation in item 2.10, which we've just gone through.
I wouldn't propose to go through it because it forms part of Audit Wales's overall package. Suffice to say, it's clear. It's 4 sections in it. You've got your management representation, which is essentially the chief exec as accountable officer, setting out and giving assurances in terms of the financial statements, the information that we've provided. So that talks to us providing what it goes with access to all the relevant information, setting out any knowledge of fraud that we're aware of, and any associated risks, related party transactions and compliance with them. The 3rd section is financial representation. So in terms of preparation of the accounts themselves and all of the supporting information in terms of assets, liabilities and transactions. Then you have the board representations, which ultimately then is the chief exec and chair on behalf of the board collectively from today within the accounts. But all that is set out in Richard's Auditor General's report later on.
I think the good news, Matt, as well, is it's a standard letter of rep. There's nothing in there that's needed to be added in. So I think that everybody will have the same letter of rep to start with. Some add things into it because there's issues going on, but for the purpose of it's a complete letter of rep going back to us, which gives us that additional assurance.
Thanks, Richard, for that as well. So thanks for that, Matt. That's included in the pack, as I said, in 2.1.0. So now we come to section 3, which is internal audit and assurance services. I'm going to invite Stephen in a moment, Head of Internal Audit and Shared Services, to introduce this item to us, which also, for clarity, did go to Audit Committee 2 days ago. So the purpose of the annual Head of Internal Audit opinion is to contribute to the assurances available to the Chief Executive as accountable officer and the board. And the 24-25 Head of Internal Audit opinion is based on 17 audits, of which 2 were provided substantial assurance, 12 reasonable assurance, 3 were advisory, so that you don't get an opinion review and an advisory report. And we've got 3 audits which are still in progress during the timing of the reviews. Have to say, I don't know if everybody else does this. I see the internal audit report and I'm just scrolling down to see where the figures are on the graph, and I'm going, oh, that's good, that's good, that's good, that's good. And I get to and then I go back and read it, because I know at that point that we haven't got any limited assurances. So I was really pleased with that. But so having said that, Stephen, I'll hand over to yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Before I start, I would also like to thank Berindre colleagues as well for their help and assistance throughout the year. It's made our process considerably easier, to say the least. So I'm very grateful for assistance from colleagues, and look forward to continuing to work with you. So with that in mind, as has been mentioned already, it is reasonable assurance overall, and it is a comfortable, reasonable assurance too. And I think it's fair to say that actually a lot of our reports are read in exactly that manner. The assurance rating is looked at first, then a detail secondly. But I am pleased to say that the final Head of Internal Audit opinion is a comfortable, reasonable assurance. I'd just like to provide a bit of context and background to the requirement of the annual opinion. It is set out within the public sector internal audit standards, which are due to be replaced by the global internal audit standards for next year, but will broadly remain very similar. It is based on and limited to the work that we've performed across the organisation's framework of governance, risk management and control. The opinion itself is based upon a plan that we developed based upon key organisational risks. It includes capital and IT audit work. And it's probably worth mentioning that the plan focuses on core trust activities in particular. Alongside this, we do take into account other audit work completed throughout audit and assurance, and indeed further information that we deem to be relevant when determining this opinion. As mentioned, Belinda is accountable for maintaining a sound system of internal control, and the head of audit opinion is a key element in the flow of assurance towards the accountable officer and the board. But overall, the board can take reasonable assurance, and what that means is that there are arrangements in place to secure governance, risk management, internal control against the areas under review, and that they are suitably designed and applied effectively. And whilst we have raised recommendations throughout the course of the year, overall the risk exposure is low to moderate. So the overall positive position to be in. So, thank you. Welcome any questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Stephen. David, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Stephen, including for all of the work that's been very, very helpful. Just conscious this is the public meeting and the formal record of approving said documents. And so while it's been mentioned in other meetings, I just think very helpful to specifically record that we do outline in the documents that we have reflected on the fact that that work that Stephen's referred to on internal control has been limited historically and in this year to the core trust. And we have agreed as part of the review going on with Welsh Government and ourselves that we will reflect on, once the external review that Welsh Government is undertaking into the governance of hosted functions, how we might amend our internal audit programme for the forthcoming year to potentially close any gaps that might arise from that assurance going forward. But none of that changes my support for what's been discussed by Stephen.
Thanks, David. So that kind of is signalling the 25-26 audit plan. Lindsay, please.
I just wanted to note that a bit like yourself, looking through it and seeing, looking straight away to see if we've got any unsatisfactory or limited assurance, and recognising that we don't. So really, really positive in that sense. And I think it is, for me, one of the really important things around internal audit is that driver for continuous improvement. Yeah. So it's also not just then thinking, oh, that's great, but also thinking, well, how is this helping us to think about areas that we can improve in within that? So, and I know Audit Committee clearly will also be looking at how management are implementing any recommendations that do come through. But so really great to see, and really hope that there's been some very helpful kind of prompts and pointers to continuous improvement for the organisation as part of this as well.
Thanks, Lindsay. And I think the audit tracker being kind of robustly implemented now is giving us an opportunity in year to make sure that those improvements are, that have been potential improvements being highlighted by internal audit are taken forward, because we're tracking the recommendations and the management response in a much more comprehensive way than we did at the beginning of my tenure. So I think that's really very helpful, also to kind of keep us all safe. So we're asked to note the content of the 24-25 Head of Internal Audit opinion, which we do, and I endorse all of the thanks and appreciation for the hard work in your team, and for the very cordial and convivial way, with a little bit of tension because you are, you know, doing an audit, Stephen, but for the way in which your team carry out the work.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you.
So that takes us to section 4 of the meeting, which is Audit Wales audit of financial statements. And this is the Audit Wales ISA 260 report, which is going to be led by Richard. I'll ask Richard to speak to the report in a moment. But just to note that this work has been prepared as part of work performed in accordance with statutory functions, and we will be asked to approve this report. So that we know what lens we're looking at. So Richard, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. Really nice to be in person again today.
Yeah.
I think as already been discussed, it's been quite an unusual year in terms of closing off the accounts. And again, from my thanks to the finance team, Matt's team, and Non and her team to get us to this position. Because I think this time last week is probably a bit more touch and go as to whether we'll be approving and signing the accounts off tomorrow. So a lot of work's gone in the last week to get to this point. So again, my thanks to the team for working with us over the last couple of weeks. So it's been an unusual year, and I probably need to apologise to the audit committee on Tuesday. We didn't have a report in front of us on Tuesday. We had a verbal update. We're still finalising the report with officers. So if you don't mind, Chair, I mind going through a bit more detail than I would normally in the first board.
Thank you. That would be helpful.
Just to make sure you're clear where we are, what we're doing. But in the context, if you got context in, Chair, I think it's an unqualified opinion. So it's a clean opinion for the trust again this year, which is really positive. And we've got a substantive report which I'll touch on, but the opinion itself hasn't been altered. So all the work goes into producing the accounts, and there's a lot of work goes into that we've touched on. The audit itself doesn't just start the last 4 or 5 weeks, it goes on through the year. I think Matt gets a bit bored of us by the time we get to the summer. There's loads of work goes into this space together. We can only do that jointly. And you are right, there is some tensions in the conversations, quite rightly, some challenge in those conversations. As independent auditors, that's what we need to be doing, working with officers, being open and honest and working things through together. Just the report itself, pretty familiar with the report coming to this committee. It's a slightly different format this time round, but the same things are also included in the report. On the pack is 306 as of the agent's introduction to what the report's all about. I've highlighted there's still 2 aspects of work still just to finalise, and that's my final review, which I'm working my way through today. And if there's any issues coming out of that process, and now we've got the final approved of our accounts report, we'll just make sure that ties into where we were the last couple of days. So that'll be concluded today. An agent's due to sign the accounts tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock, and then we lay the accounts with the Senate. Page 307 of the pack then sets out, so at a glance, what comes out of this report. And the good news, an unqualified opinion, excellent news. There are some matters I'll touch on shortly, and there is a substantive report which I'll explain. There is one uncorrected mistake which Matt's already touched on, and there's no recommendations in this report. The recommendations don't warrant being in this report, so what we'll do outside this now is work with finance, have a bit of a lessons learned process. We pull together some issues from both sides in terms of how we keep improving this process, and probably look at the timeliness of how we close this process off next year, given probably there's people new to this process. And I think it's just making sure that we work backwards from the board and agents sign in to see where these papers are ready, so the committee and the audit committee in particular can have on record our report, which can be discussed in a bit more detail. Page 309 of the pack then talks about materiality. Familiar with that concept, and what the reader of the accounts are misunderstanding if we get it wrong. We set that at 11.5 million, so a high level in terms of what targets are testing. But we do report on anything over $500,000 in terms of issues in this report itself, and that's where that misstatement has come through. It's not material. It's not a big issue. We agree with the treatment, especially the time of when we found that issue. But we need to report back to the committee and so on. I guess the main crux of this report then is page 310, 311, 312, which is the audit findings. Touch on the uncorrected misstatement. It's a classification issue, so I think we're satisfied in where we've ended up there. There are some corrected misstatements in the back of the report, which I went through with Tracy and the audit committee on Tuesday. Most of those were classification issues. Nothing affected the bottom line for the trust, which is positive news in terms of the break-even position, and even the late contingent liabilities, a disclosure note which doesn't impact on any bottom line figures. I flagged some significant areas in terms of issues we found in the audit, and probably the first one which we sort of touched on is that delay in the process. And it's not so much the delay, I think it's the uncertainty the trust has been working through in terms of how you work with shared services, what that arrangement actually looks like. The Welsh Government review, which is currently ongoing. And I think through the last few weeks, I think it's understanding what the trust is going to put together in terms of the accountability report in particular, how we're going to sort of badge that report. And I think we finalised that last week with the trust. And then that influenced where we went in terms of our reporting today, with a clean opinion and a substantive report, Chair. So I think that section just sets out the uncertainty. We understand why there's uncertainty, but it doesn't impact in terms of what came to the board today in terms of papers or what went to the committee on Tuesday. The next one then talks about compliance with appointment guidance. Bit of a grey area. I think some new guidance came out from Welsh Government last year into appointments. So I think all health boards this year and trusts will have something in there, ISA 260. Some we pick up as part of the lessons learned with the trust, but mostly with Welsh Government, make sure there's clarity in what that looks like, to see what the expectations across the board. Because we say there that the trail wasn't ideal for some parts of this, but it's been clear what that formality actually needed to be, whether the Welsh Government need to be involved with us, and we've raised that already with them. And the last point then, talk about delays and some of the audit queries. I think Steve put on record on Tuesday, I think the general process went really well this year. Working with finance, we've been on, I think we've got to things really well together in the shortened window. So that's really pleasing. But there's still some aspects where that was tight and harder to do. The timetable keeps getting changed and brought forward. We just make sure that we're all on the same page there. So if there's any outside finance we need to work with, we think that that's part of the good lessons learned, because any delays just knock on this report, come into this committee and this board to talk through in any sort of detail. There's three sort of issues there which we can quite easily work through and sort out. Page 313 talks about the opinion. It's an unqualified opinion. I've said that a couple of times. That's the good news. Touch on the letter of rep. The standard letter of reps come through to us. But I probably would want to touch on then, Chair, if I can, is page 331 of the pack, which is the Order General Report, substantive report.
331.
331, I think it is. Page 29 of my report.
You get there. Really there. Right there. Okay. Thank you. Everybody got it?
Okay.
Yeah. Fine.
I call it a substantive report. I think this is, we haven't done this for the trust for a number of years, if ever. But what this report actually does is bring to the attention of the reader the accounts, issues that are reflected in the accounts. It's not a qualification, but given the public interest in some of the issues that are going on, and given the commentary in the annual governance statement about the Welsh Government review, we couldn't be silent on that. So all that does is highlight what the trust has said in terms of the governance issues they've identified with shared services. Identify the Welsh Government doing a review at the moment, which is due to conclude by the end of July, I believe. I think from our perspective, we're watching that space and working with the trust and the Welsh Government to see if anything comes out of that which we need to be aware of and impacts on our statutory duties. We're not committing to anything at the moment with the trust, and we've had conversations with David and Matt in terms of what that means for our work. I think we're watching due process first, see what the Welsh Government comes up with, and then we'll all sit down and see what that means for us as the statutory auditors of the trust, internal audit and other colleagues. So I was going to stop there. I'll take any questions, any of that report, Chair.
Thanks, Richard. That's really very helpful way in which you kind of brought us up to date with things from, since 2 days ago. Yeah. And you provided the context in which the report was put together this year. So that's been really helpful. I'm now going to open it up to any queries or observations. Stephen Harries, Lauren. Those are the hands I've got up at, and then David Donegan. So Stephen. When I said Lauren, I meant Lindsay.
I've got it.
Did you? But actually, I looked at you and I said, I looked straight at you and I said Lauren, didn't I? I'm so sorry, Lindsay. But it's still. Was Lindsay before Stephen?
No, it's fine.
But I go Stephen, Lindsay, Lauren, David. Stephen.
Thank you. So I just want to pick up on this point. Shared services and the narrative there. I mean, again, this is just my education and understanding in a sense. So obviously this is the report for the Lindsay University NHS Trust, but the issue is around hosted bodies and as opposed to the core services. So I just want to just check then, in terms of shared services, the national body which we host, is there an equivalent process to this process? Because if shared services aren't in this, I know they're in the accounts, but if they're not in the audit opinion, is there a separate audit opinion for shared services, or is this part of the, I suppose, part of what has to be explored and understood?
Thanks, Stephen. No, I think the opinion we put on this document and these accounts cover the whole organisation, included hosted services. Right. So the work that we do, Matt's team, includes any transactions with shared services, right, okay, transactions as well. So it's slightly different to the internal audit. The financial accounts work picks up transactions which apply to all parts of this organisation. This opinion covers shared services.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to get that clear in my own mind and probably with that in minutes then. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Lindsay, please.
And that's really helpful because that was part of what I wanted to ask about as well, because I think it's really helpful to have this set out in
Yes.
the audit report this year.
Yes.
And to make clear that there is work being done to understand how this needs to work effectively for the trust as a whole, for shared services as well, because clearly it needs to be effective all round. There's a huge amount of public funds being spent through shared services, for which the trust board's name is put to, you know, around a lot of that. So actually recognising that we've recognised issues in the previous year, and the following year will be the year that we're looking at for how we move forward, and really welcome that. I did want to just ask a very practical thing. Richard, you mentioned that, and I'm aware of this clearly, that deadlines have been moving forward over recent years, and that's been part of what makes it quite challenging for all health bodies, I'm sure, but us as a trust. Is that where we know that it's as early as it's going to be, or is the deadline going to be moving yet further forward?
We asked this question most
Yeah,
days, don't we?
I think it depends who you ask. I think talking to the service and as the auditor, I think this body works for us and for the service. Bringing forward any more, I think would get too tight and probably unpick some quality issues.
Yeah.
I think working to the deadlines we've got is currently what we've got in place for next year, Matt, I think. But there is talk of whether we come forward again. So I think it's getting to another year of this time frame. It's 2 weeks off this year in terms of the process.
Yeah.
I think it's quite tight then, to be honest. So they're trying to go back to pre-COVID times, which would be a bit earlier, but there's a debate still going on.
So but it's the same for next year.
Yeah.
It's really helpful.
Can I one other
Yes.
point? I think you're right, Stephen, and this is about the accounts and the wider aspect. One thing we discussed in with David, Shared Service and Welsh Government, is in terms of the structure assessment work. In the past, that's been focused on the core trust activities, because there's not been any issues to put us into shared services. But so I think the issue for us now is what comes out of this piece of work and what that means for internal audits work going forward and ours. And now we've had conversations with Welsh Government in that space as well, because things have evolved. We need to capture what we need to capture. So the FA and PA work for them is slightly different, something that going forward we'll hopefully align that as well.
This is a public meeting, financial audit, performance audit, FA and PA.
Oh yeah, thank you.
We try to avoid the acronym if we can.
I said it many times.
You're absolutely right. I'm going to come to Lauren in a second. And what this reflects to me is you know, the essence of good governance, which is not so much that everything is perfect, but that, you know, you identify issues and you begin to work them through and to arrive at a satisfactory conclusion. And that's what this is describing. That's the approach, the journey that we're now on.
Definitely, thank you. Yeah.
Lauren, please, and then David. Lauren.
And I'll just say something in relation to the conversation on performance first, I was going to say. So on timing first in relation to performance. So, I mean, just to note, if the timing was brought forward any earlier, it would cause us an issue in terms of performance reporting as well, because we clearly need to report until the end of March in terms of the performance across all of our services. And as we've talked about a lot of times, in terms of trying to look at the timing of performance reporting, the earliest robust way we can do that is then getting it to the May board for public reporting. So, and then this performance report is drafted, you know, in parallel with getting those May board papers ready and finalised over the first couple of weeks of June. So from a performance perspective, it would be, you know, very difficult to move that forward. And again,
so you're mindful, absolutely mindful of that. And,
yeah. So this is slightly, but you know, we can pick this up. And I had only read the report yesterday, Richard, so apologies. But there's just, it says that the overpayment was identified by you, and it wasn't. It was identified by me in terms of the retrospective correction to the banding. So I don't know where that's just on page 21.
Thanks, Lauren. I can I sense your, you know, I have a feeling about that.
I just want to give it back.
Okay.
I'm happy to change that.
Yeah, thank you.
David, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I suppose building on Stephen's question and Richard's supplementary, I suppose, clarification, I'm content from the conversations with Audit Wales and with Matt that the financial auditing does reflect the fact that this board and I as accountable officer am expected to be accountable for all of the entity as a whole, including our hosted bodies, and that the internal and external audit work around finances is comprehensive. But as Richard said, it is very clear that the other external audit work, structured assessment and other targeted audits that are not around finance, but around governance, internal systems of control, compliance with non-financial aspects or other value judgments have been limited to the core trust. So that is the reason why we have flagged, as Donna says, an area where should we remain accountable for not just the financial delivery and compliance of hosted bodies, but their performance and their governance, we will need to strengthen the work we do and how confident we are in our internal and external audit opinion across the entity as a whole, rather than just core services. And I think Richard's clarification is absolutely fine, but again, for the purposes of the public meeting and the context of those comments, I think it's just important for me to also say that.
Thank you, David. Stephen wants to, I think, just respond to that.
I will just add to it in a sense, because again, we're obviously reading these words and we've read them several times. And I'm just looking now at the report of the Auditor General, the SEN is this whole issue. It's page 29, where it correctly states the governance statement highlights concerns regarding governance and accountability arrangements. Now, that could be read as concerns discovered by the Auditor General, when in fact it was concerns raised by the trust, I believe I'm right in saying.
Yes.
And as this is a public document, and it's a very, very important subject, I'm just wondering whether or not, to add clarity, it should say highlights concerns raised
by the trust.
Rather than, because the typical reading would be this was discovered by the Auditor General, and in fact, this is something we've raised and have been raising for a little while. I don't know, Richard.
It's a very,
to us, I guess.
I thought we captured that thing.
But just that leading sentence is very often, anybody reading it reads the first sentence, and that impacts and influences how they then read the rest. So I say, as you can sense, it's quite an important matter to us that there's clarity on this, about how this whole issue has arisen in terms of the year-end accounts and in terms of the particularly the points that David's raising around structured assessments and the wider performance of hosted bodies.
Can I just check what you're referring to in terms of the get this right from the meeting? Is it that first part of the governance statement highlights concerns? Because that is the trust governance statement.
Yeah, and we all understand. I suppose I'm saying we understand this absolutely.
You had the word interest.
This is
word interest.
This is a public document
that the public won't read.
And even perhaps members of the Senate might not fully appreciate that this is something we've initiated.
So do you want to add the word the trust?
Highlights concerns raised by the trust.
Yeah.
Or raised by the trust board, actually would be a more accurate section, raised by the trust board.
Content with that, Richard?
I am, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so
I just think that's an important a little bit of text to put in myself.
Thank you, Stephen. I can't see any other hands. There's not much for you to do to get this now. To finalise, so we ought to be in a position. Let's pick up this afternoon. Tomorrow afternoon, was it? Oh, I thought we were cutting that. It was very fine. So we are asked to approve the Audit Wales ISA 260 report. Colleagues, are we all content, given with those very slight amendments, but important amendments, to approve the ISA 260? Thank you. And once again, Richard, thank you. You really have worked very hard alongside us to get the report into the format that it is today. And on behalf of the board, thank you, Richard, very much indeed. That concludes the substantive items on the agenda today. I haven't been informed of any other business, is an extraordinary board meeting anyway, so I'd rather have any other business at a public board meeting. The date of our next meeting will be the 24th of July, 2025. Colleagues, please note that that's been brought forward by a week. It was initially scheduled for the 31st of July, but we brought it forward for a week for a couple of reasons. It's more appropriate that we have it on the 24th of July, not least because our Chief Exec will be on leave on the 31st for pre-planned leave. And it's important that David is here, and the 31st of July would be my last day. So if you don't mind, colleagues, I don't want to be sitting all day in a board meeting on my very last day in the trust. So with that, I'll close the meeting. And I would ask, please, if board colleagues could just stay for 2 minutes, and we will still have then time for a comfort break before we begin the extraordinary private board meeting that we have this afternoon.